Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's just dive right into this, because today we're looking at something absolutely fascinating and, honestly, a little terrifying. We're going to examine 3 documented case files of bizarre, completely unexplainable human behavior that happens during the isolated hours of the graveyard shift. We're pulling these accounts from first-hand reports of everyday people who just found themselves working or traveling through the dead of night. We'll be breaking down the exact environmental and psychological factors at play here and really mapping out how and why these anomalies happen. Imagine hearing this at 2 in the morning. Calm as anything, don't worry, it's not my blood. Yeah, this verbatim statement from our first case file perfectly sets the stage for what we're looking at today. Late-night gas stations, desolate highways, they act as these weird liminal spaces. They're environments where normal societal rules just seem to completely unravel, and the unexpected instantly becomes your terrifying reality. So let's start with incident 1, which we're calling blood and apathy. Okay, picture the scene. It's a remote convenience store. A clerk named David is working the dead silent 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Out of nowhere, an entirely unexpected threat casually walks through the front door. The guy is a tall, athletic male in his 30s, and he is covered in what David described as a cartoonish amount of blood. We're talking a massive splatter across his chest, streaks all over his face and arms, yet his demeanor incredibly relaxed, almost bored. His eyes were just empty, like there was nothing behind them. He browsed the store like absolutely nothing was wrong. And it's this jarring mismatch, this horrifying visual, paired with a totally apathetic demeanor that just completely short-circuited the clerk's ability to process the danger in real time. But as you might guess, that calm didn't last. The second the suspect paid and walked out, David grabbed the phone to dial 911. And in a terrifying 2-second escalation, the suspect realized what was happening through the glass, came right back in, and the situation degraded instantly. He didn't just climb the counter, the guy literally launched himself entirely across it and began strangling David on the floor. It was a frantic, immediate fight for survival. This brilliantly illustrates just how insanely volatile these anomalies are. Honestly, the only thing that ended this brutal attack was a desperate split-second bluff by the clerk. He just started screaming that he had a gun, and thankfully that sent the attacker fleeing into the night. Now, you'd think that would be the end of the nightmare, right? Well, let's move to Incident 2, the Tailored Stalker. This is a chilling sequel that took place months later at that exact same location. So David actually stayed at his job. He rationalized the first attack as just some crazy freak occurrence. But then, in the middle of the night, a new man walks in. He's wearing an expensive, perfectly tailored dark gray suit. And as we all know, a tailored suit in the middle of nowhere past midnight is a glaring, immediate red flag. He didn't browse the aisles, he didn't buy anything, he walked directly up to the clerk, reached into his jacket, and pulled out a photograph. And that photograph? It was an unmistakable image of the exact same blood-covered man who had tried to kill David months prior. David's survival instinct immediately kicked back in. His gut is just screaming, deny, deny, deny. So he told the man in the suit he had absolutely no idea who the person in the photo was. What followed was this excruciatingly long, dead silent standoff. The man just stared at David with these cold, calculating eyes. Finally, he turned to leave, but right before the door, he delivered this terrifying parting statement in this low, gruff voice. "I know you're lying." And from there, the encounter quickly spiraled into a psychological nightmare, escalating with this really methodical dread. For the first 2 weeks, a silver SUV starts appearing parked across from the gas station during the day. By week 3, the boundaries are completely breached. The same SUV is spotted at the clerk's local grocery store, and then, terrifyingly, on his own residential street. Finally, at week 4, we hit the breaking point. David is jolted awake in the dead of night by a rock thrown straight through his living room window. The danger had officially invaded his home. The realization hit him hard. Ignoring the problem just wasn't going to work anymore. This wasn't a random encounter, it was highly calculated intimidation. To escape the threat, he had to abandon his life entirely. So he immediately quit his job, moved to a nondescript apartment a few towns over, and eventually had to relocate completely out of state just to finally find some peace. Which brings us to a really unsettling question. What happens when the danger isn't just waiting for you at the gas station, but actually secretly leaves with you? Let's shift our perspective away from the convenience store counter and take this directly out onto the dark highway. This is Incident 3, the unseen passenger. This event was reported by an exhausted driver who was heading home from a really grueling job site. He decided to pull into an empty lot around 11 p.m. to take a quick nap, woke up a bit later, and got right back on the highway. Now, his perception was that of just a routine, autopilot drive. He felt totally safe, zoned out in the quiet of the night. But the horrifying reality? An unseen intruder was lying completely flat in the open bed of his truck, literally inches behind his head. The driver's perceived safety completely masked the terrifying vulnerability of the situation. About 20 minutes into the drive, the driver started hearing these faint, thumping noises behind him. At first, he thinks, oh, it's just my tools shifting around, so he ignores it and just cranks up the radio. But the noise persists. Eventually, frustrated, he slams his hand against the hood of the truck. The noise stopped, but only for a second. Then, the silence was shattered by a deafening crack. As the driver described it, it was like someone had thrown a rock against one of my windows. So the driver whips his head around to witness pure, unadulterated chaos. Standing up right there in the bed of his moving truck was a manic individual in a hoodie, frantically smashing the truck's rear glass divider with one of the driver's very own tools. The driver is now swerving wildly all over the highway, trying to avoid flipping the vehicle, all while this trapped maniac is moving barbarically, trying to claw his way into the cab like a wild animal. Somehow, the driver manages to skid to a halt on the shoulder. Fueled by just pure adrenaline, he jumps out, which prompts the intruder to bail out of the truck bed and sprint into the pitch-black tree line. But the danger wasn't entirely gone. And this brings us to a sickening question. After the intruder vanished, what horrifying secret was left behind in the back of the truck? When the driver finally inspected his shattered rear window, he found a foreign object sitting there that definitely wasn't one of his tools. It was a small trash bag, roughly the size of 2 fists, wrapped tightly over on itself multiple times to keep whatever was inside secure. It was noticeably wet to the touch. And worst of all, it was emitting this rancid, overwhelming smell like rotting meat. The driver felt this immediate, deeply panicked need to just grab it and hurl it as far into the woods as possible. But the nightmare had one final, really grim twist. After tossing it, getting back into his truck, and driving away, the driver looked down at his steering wheel. The bag had left a sticky, red residue completely coating his hands. Blood. It's wild how this physical reality seamlessly connects right back to the brutal themes of our very first case study. Okay, let's move into our final section, the anatomy of nightmares. We really need to synthesize the key takeaways from all 3 of these case files to truly understand why these late-night events unfold the way they do. When we analyze these anomalies side by side, very specific environmental and physiological factors emerge that leave individuals uniquely exposed during the graveyard shift. Look at this breakdown. 40% of the vulnerability stems directly from severe isolation. I mean, when you're the only person around for miles, you become a singular, easy target. 35% is tied to exhaustion. Fatigue severely clouds your judgment, just like the driver whose zoned out state prevented him from even noticing an intruder climbing into his truck. And the remaining 25%? That's the lack of reliable security, which just completely emboldens people to act out violently or bizarrely, knowing there won't be any immediate consequences. And I want to revisit this incredibly perceptive observation from our first clerk, David. When faced with a man covered in blood but acting completely bored, he said, "It doesn't fit any familiar category of lived experience." This brilliantly illustrates why our brains so often just freeze up in these situations. When we encounter an anomaly that's so far outside the bounds of societal norms, our cognitive processing essentially stalls out. We just lack the mental blueprint to react quickly, and that gives the threat a massive upper hand. So, what you should really take away from this explainer is that the dead of night strips away all the normal safety nets we implicitly rely on during the day. The sheer isolation of it breeds a completely different kind of reality. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to consider. The next time you pull into an empty, brightly lit gas station at 2 in the morning, are you absolutely sure you are alone? Keep that in mind. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.